I don't think that this is Trump's world forever. I think let's just give it some time. There's going to be a lot of shock and awe in the first few weeks, and we're expecting that in the first few months and perhaps the first year. But I think that you will very quickly see pushback. And as we all know, things change very quickly in politics, and certainly here in DC.
There feels like there is a vibe shift where Trump has he's done 3 elections, he's won 2 of them, he's won the argument, his supporters feel they've won this moment. This feels like a movement has happened. But the big question really is, where does it go next?
Do you think that as a result of the majority he's got, the campaign he fought, and what he wants to do to this country, the America that starts on Inauguration Day will be fundamentally and forever different to the America that everyone else has got used to, since World War II? Welcome to the Fourcast from Washington, D.C., where everything, and I mean everything, is about to change. Not just the inauguration itself on Monday, which Donald Trump has moved inside because apparently it's far too cold for all those people to turn up on the Mall in front of the Capitol building, but also what this inauguration signifies for America and for the rest of the world. You could call it the climax of the triumph of right-wing populism across the board. Well, to discuss not just what's going to happen on Inauguration Day itself, but also the consequences and the first week of Trump, the sequel, I'm joined by Kiran Moodley and by Siobhan Kennedy, our Washington correspondent. Welcome to you both.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is it the final festival of progressive America, the wake of progressive America?
I don't think so. I think progressive America feels that way right now. I think they're still very wounded and distressed by what's happened. I think for a while, yes, it's very clear that their policies and their desires will be very much pushed to the side. But remember, 2 years ago, Donald Trump himself was an outcast after the midterms. He was politically frozen, even by his own party. So, yes, it all feels like not just Trump's Republican Party, but Trump's world right now. But progressives and Democrats are a tough bunch. And they might roll over for this inauguration. There might not be the same sense of
pushback.
Yeah, I can't think of the word.
Or anger, or rage. I mean, the one thing I've noticed is when I was here for the first Trump inauguration in 2016, you couldn't walk around the city with a MAGA hat. Not that I was wearing one, but if you did wear a MAGA hat, people were quite rude to you.
Yeah.
And because they thought that basically MAGA and Trump were the aberration. The mood, Kiran, this time around is remarkably different, isn't it?
Yes, and even from the Biden inauguration, I mean, I think this is the first inauguration, I guess, since the Obama ones, where there does seem to be a vibe shift in terms of much more positivity. Because as you say, in 2017, there was so much anger boiling over. There was the Women's March the following day, which had bigger crowds than the Trump inauguration. 4 years ago, Trump, after January the 6th, and we were in the midst of COVID, there were hardly any, there weren't allowed to be crowds. Everything was still felt negative. So this time there feels like there is a vibe shift where Trump has he's done 3 elections, he's won 2 of them, he's won the argument, his supporters feel they've won this moment. This feels like a movement has happened. But the big question really is, where does it go next?
And we'll discuss that in a minute. But I mean, the other difference is that Trump likes to point out that it was a landslide victory, the biggest in the history, which is nonsense, of course. The margins are fairly tight, but they are convincing. Siobhan.
Yeah, I mean, they are. And crucially for him, he won the popular vote, which was the big deal for him. But yes, he won it by a very small margin. So, yeah, I mean, it's a convincing win, and that's what it feels like here in DC. And people are rolling over and they're going with the inauguration. But I don't think, to your original point, that this is Trump's world forever. I think let's just give it some time. There's going to be a lot of shock and awe in the first few weeks, and we're expecting that in the first few months and perhaps the first year. But I think that you will very quickly see pushback. And as we all know, things change very quickly in politics, and certainly here in DC.
And of course, his supporters do hope it's going to be Trump's world forever. They're very much invested in this being a fundamental change, a transformation of America.
Yes, and again, it's that what Siobhan was saying. It's that vibe of a feeling of a real turning point against the actual practicalities of the politics of it all, because. Not just what he can do, but also, he did win the popular vote, but only by like 1.5%. He won the swings, he won all those 7 swing states. But it's not like a big landslide in the way of Obama or anything else, but it feels that way. And I think that's a really interesting thing, that it feels like...
And he's very good at making it feel that way.
It feels like
that's what he does.
He's had the final say, but he hasn't yet, because there are this next 4 years to go.
We'll talk about day one and week one in a minute, but just on the inauguration itself, it's fascinating to me that a man who's so obsessed with crowd sizes, who you would have thought could have banked on a bigger crowd this time round than in 2016, right? Because it was a bigger victory, the MAGA crowd feel, empowered, etc., that he's moved it inside. Now, the official reason is that it's going to be too cold, but actually it might not be all that cold. Is he worried about the numbers being too small?
Yes, he is.
Because that's what NBC's reporting.
Yes.
I wonder if
he must be, because no one will ever forget the long pan of the mall last time.
Terrible.
People here, and then nobody towards the back. So I think he's worried about that, and I think he also just loves the getting in among the crowd and being the centre of attention, which necessarily he won't be.
But there is also the thing that maybe there's also, I think, here, like, the fundamental issue with Trump and how he sees this moment is that, on the one hand, you would expect him to want to have all these crowds and to have all his supporters out there. On the other hand, he now has a smaller rotunda where he can have perhaps the people who might be much more important in all this. Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos.
Yeah, but they would have been on the stage anyway.
Yeah, but now but it's almost like, is he... The argument, and this is where the new pushback is coming from the Democrats, who are sort of in disarray, is this, what Biden was saying, this oligarchy. So is this, now what we're seeing is this oligarchy of, Trump says he's there for America first and for the people, but actually... he's got these tech billionaires. He's got these people who are nudging him, saying, "Hey, I've got money in TikTok. Let's try and bring it back."
Okay, let's look at the guest list. What does that tell you about the next Trump presidency, from who's been invited and who's not been invited?
Well, as I say, the oligarchs who will be on display, as Joe Biden talks about them. Elon Musk.
Oligarchy.
Yes, exactly. Elon Musk. It's fascinating to see. Mark Zuckerberg. I mean, I think that again.
Who turned up yesterday and was surrounded by bodyguards and went to one of the many sort of inaugural balls or pre-inaugural balls.
Which goes into this vibe shift. I mean, it was only 4 years ago that what was then Facebook, now Meta.
Sliding off.
Them along with Twitter, now X. Everything's changed. He was banned from those platforms after January 6th, and now they're all there on display.
And not only that, they've all given, not just bending the knee, but also writing. They've each given $1 million to the inauguration committee. Never has an inauguration committee ever had this much money to spend on canapes and drinks or music, whatever else. And there's this amazing image of Zuckerberg, which I cannot get out of my head. Zuckerberg at Mar-a-Lago, I think about a month ago, not just kissing the ring of Trump, but also then listening to the January the 6th Memorial Choir perform the national anthem, and he's got his hand on his heart. That is a very different Zuckerberg to the one that we saw, as you said, 4 years ago. So the millionaire bros will all be there. I wonder if Musk is going to be allowed to move into the White House. Will he have an office
honestly,
there?
I was thinking the same thing. He's been paying $2,000 a night to live in Mar-a-Lago. Where will he live now? I mean, he will think
I'm sure he'll find a hotel room somewhere. But will he be... Because I think we've got to treat the Trump presidency like a medieval court. This is like Henry VIII without the culture and nukes, right?
Yes.
It's a bit like that. So access to the monarch is vital. So
I wonder... He'll have an office next door.
Well, I wonder, because Steve Bannon, and the MAGA crowd, the hardcore MAGA crowd, who hate Musk, and they hate him...
But I think there are two things there. I mean, one, as you say, there is... within this Republican victory, there are obviously competing factions. Yeah. There are the America First, sort of almost J.D. Vance types who want, they still want a government which ensures that Americans are much more prosperous. They're getting welfares, social security, etc. On the other hand, you have the Elon Musk lot who are actually like smaller government and still believe in that sort of capitalist thing, which we've seen with the dispute over the visas. But the other point when it talks about is Elon Musk going to go into the White House, I think the one thing you've always got to remember with Trump, and this goes throughout his life, is that the number one person who should always be the focus is Trump. Yeah. I think the only person he's ever sort of allowed to dominate him in any way is his father. He has all these father issues, etc. So I think if Elon Musk ever becomes someone who grabs more headlines than Trump,
then surely
he
will be thrown under the Trump bus.
Exactly.
Okay, let's look at day one, right? What can we... he talks a lot about day one. Day one is, Monday afternoon. So he's going to go to the White House after the ceremony. He's going to sit down at the Resolute desk in the Oval Office. And he's going to sign how many emergency decrees?
Well, I mean, I was listening to Charlie Kirk, who's a podcaster and an influential sort of younger voice within this movement, and he was talking about a blitzkrieg of executive orders, hundreds and hundreds. We think there's going to be obviously ones on immigration, that there'll be ones to do, I think, specifically on energy and electric vehicles. There's an executive order which he can completely get rid of, which was a Joe Biden one about an incentive for electric vehicles by 2030, which he can get rid of completely. There could be possibly January 6 pardons. I mean, he can do all these executive orders. It's about sending that message and a narrative of I'm doing something.
He doesn't want to flood the zone with too many of them. I guess he wants people to notice what they are, and immigration and deportation.
I think we'll see things that are very easy for him are pulling out of Paris Climate Accord. That will happen. I think he will. It'd be really interesting to see if he pulls the EV incentives for people.
You say that easy for him, slightly harder for the planet, I would have thought.
And it's slightly harder when your right-hand man is Elon Musk. I mean, we're immediately going to see some pushback there. There's going to be tension. They're going after energy in a big way, and yet here is the man beside him who's brought him to the White House, who is Mr. Green Energy. I think, but really, the big thing is going to be migration. I think we're going to see that this week. I think that's where they're going for the shock and awe. Whether they achieve it, how they achieve it, because this is really difficult stuff. It's really difficult stuff. They're not suddenly going to go with a big net and round people up, tied up, and chuck them out. That's what they say they're going to do, but I think it's going to be much
But Homan, who is the
kind
of immigration, the deportation czar, has actually used the word shock and awe. He has said in interviews there will be shock and awe in the first week when it comes to deportation. And apparently, according to the Wall Street Journal, the city that they've targeted is Chicago, bastion of democratic politics, sanctuary city, and that's where they've already started to kind of compile lists and they're rounding up people.
But they have, but because it's leaked, the last thing you want to do is leak, everyone scatters. They're saying now, or he's saying now at least, Homan, that, oh no, we might not do Chicago. But the point is they're going to do all the sanctuary cities that have been welcoming and kind and whose democratic leaders are saying, you leave these people alone. So we're going to see shock and awe. The shock and awe might more be the pushback with democratic leaders and the police and people on the streets, than it will be with them rounding up migrants and throwing them out. I think that you'll definitely see more officers, National Guard. You'll see that sort of thing immediately brought to the border. But of course, the border's not the problem at the moment. No. It's the interior and the millions and millions of people that Biden let in and allowed to go and be with their sponsors in the country. How will he round those up? And it's the criminals he wants first, don't forget.
And then the potential for human drama, for real suffering, for families being torn apart, the stuff that we saw in 2016, but on a much bigger scale, that's definitely here.
It will be a shock and awe process to be seeing that he's doing something. But I think already Homan was talking about scaling back some of the positivity around how much they could actually do, and actually warning Congress, if we want to do this in the long run, rather than a few ICE raids, and we actually want to really clamp down on this in terms of the people who are unauthorised, but also, trying to get all the different levels of, because when we talk about undocumented, there are so many different categories.
Absolutely.
That's going to take a lot of money. And this is a Congress which, Donald Trump does not want to spend loads of money necessarily. This is a Congress which he doesn't have that many people, especially in the House. So it's going to be a long, tricky pathway ahead, just as much as, and we are seeing some backtracking, not just on immigration, but also with Ukraine. It was going to be dealt with in one day. Now it's going to be more than that. There are those things happening.
And just to be clear, I mean, he talked during the campaign, although less so in recent weeks, about the 11 million number of undocumented people, foreigners in this country. I mean, to deport 11 million is virtually impossible, and it's too costly, and it'll also have a massive inflationary effect on the labour market and so on. So I think we can assume that will probably not happen.
We spoke to the head of ICE under Biden for a piece we did before Christmas, who said... the Immigration and Control
For those of us who don't
Enforcement Agency works within the Department of Homeland Security. It's the people that get the immigrants out, enforcement. He ran that business, and he said, in order to get to the scale of the numbers that Trump and Homan are talking about, you would need billions, tens of billions more dollars than is currently allocated, and hundreds of thousands of more enforcement officers. And if you're prepared to pull in for military and police and pull in all those resources, and by the way, who's looking after the crime in America then? You might get to $1 million a year. You might get to $1 million a year.
Which is a hell of a lot.
Which is a hell of a lot.
What about tariffs? Can we expect much on tariffs in week one?
The interesting thing about tariffs, again, is that you hear this muddled messaging where is tariffs actually something that Donald Trump will do and risk the potential economic effects of that, which one assumes, as what economists say, will affect the American consumer, the American people, at a time when they don't want that? Or is it, as people within his team have said, is that it's a very good negotiating tactic to bring people to the table to get the deal?
Because they're elastic, aren't they? You can, and they're very arbitrary. You can say 20% for you, Kiran, 15% for you, Siobhan, and then you can fight it out amongst each other. I mean, but what I find so fascinating is that, you know, whether you're talking to the Danish government in Copenhagen after the Greenland episode, whether you're talking to people in Ottawa, you know, Canadians about, you know, my God, are we going to be the 51st state of the United States? Whether you're talking to people in Panama or indeed in Western Europe or Ukraine or China, everyone around the planet is getting their affairs in order for the possibility, eventuality, maybe probability of what Trump may or may not do. I mean, that is, you know, I think we should have to be really clear. I think we are in a very brave and chaotic new world when it comes to how America, which has always been seen, for better or worse, as part of the solution, will operate. And now, to many people, it is a really big part of the problem.
I think we've seen that writ large with, you know, all hell will break loose if Hamas doesn't come to the table. I mean, that's a whole different discussion. But
or Netanyahu, for that matter.
Or Netanyahu, but I'm saying he says these things, and as you rightly say, whether or not he follows through, it brings people to the table and it makes them get their house in order. Whether we should pay more into NATO. Mandelson, the new ambassador here, he put out a statement, or did an op-ed the other day, and he was parroting many of Trump's lines. People should pay more into NATO. I think Trump's right. And, you know, so I think it has the effect of making people sit up and listen. Whether or not those tariffs immediately come in is not clear. But he's done it before. I think he's pretty firm on tariffs. I think the America First agenda, tariffs is one of the big tools in the bag. And
but how
I think we will see
predictable?
tariffs.
You know, people like predictability, especially if you're a foreign government or you're a foreign business. You want predictability in order to plan your own future.
Yes.
And one thing that really freaks out the Chinese is that Trump is not predictable enough for them, and they are the masters, or try to be the masters of predictability. I just wonder to what extent, you know, his personality, his mercurial personality, underpinned by the fact that you have an incredibly broad coalition of opinions around the White House, much more so than in 2016, all the way from RFK Jr. to the kind of Marco Rubio, you know, pro-life, traditional, you know, America power projectors, anti-China, etc., etc. I mean, there's a vast coalition of people there, and they only have one thing in common, and that is their allegiance and fealty to Donald Trump, and that's different.
Which is the big sort of question mark over the next 4 years, really, isn't it? It's because we understand that Trump has learned his lessons from his first term, that the people around him, you know, they're going to be much more focused on his agenda, and there won't be as many sort of
more loyal,
individuals within the Republican Party speaking out against him. But that is still a fragile coalition in many ways.
Sure.
And it's figuring out where the breaks will come and where the fallouts will come, and we assume they will happen.
A lot of what we can expect in the next 4 years will be determined by the speech that he gives, you know, on Capitol Hill on Inauguration Day. And I still remember the collective dropping of jaws and the intake of breath on the podium in 2016, but also, you know, everywhere, when he talked about the carnage of America. Carnage in America. Carnage is not a word on anyone's mind in 2016. The country did not look like carnage. I mean, there were problems. There was crime, there was unemployment here and there, but it didn't feel like carnage central. Nor does it at the moment, to be honest. It's divided, but it doesn't feel like carnage central. Do you think that he will repeat a line as abrasive as that, or will he try to show the gentler, kinder side of Donald Trump, who's now who's got what he wanted and can afford to unite the nation?
I've been thinking about this very thing. What tone will he take?
Well, what do you think? Come on, predict the tone. You can do it. You can feel the soul of Trump. You know, he listens to you all the time. You tell him.
I think he won't be able to resist a sort of carnage light.
Right.
It's not carnage, as you say, and he can't point. He will try and point to carnage in the economy, but demonstrably the numbers do not point to that.
Yeah.
Crime numbers that he really attached the carnage line to
again
do not point to that.
But he doesn't care about numbers, does he?
But he doesn't care about numbers, and he has to stick with the narrative that won him the election.
Yeah.
So, but I think there is carnage around immigration.
But isn't it?
So I think he'll. But interestingly, when he won, there was a lot of talk of unity. You were there that night. He did start.
Yeah.
There was talk of unity, which was Trump, the unifier, is not what we're used to. But I think he does feel that he has the power and the numbers and the swagger and the vibe around him that he can try and be this unifier.
But if one thing we know about Trump is that he likes publicity. He's an attention seeker. We're in caps. Surely the thing that gets you most attention when everyone is expecting carnage in America from the podium is actually to say, kumbaya, peace in our time. And that would have people's attention, right? Yeah. Maybe that's what he's going to do. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean,
maybe.
You would assume that if you go back to the first inauguration speech, it was like, it was two things. It was American carnage. There's this country where, factories are rusting away, people haven't got jobs, it's all depressing. And the other thing is that I'm finally going to bring government away from the elites in Washington back to you, the people. Those were the two messages. And overall, it was quite negative. So you would assume it's going to be much more positive and upbeat. This is Trump having won the victory. But again, we're trying to predict Trump. And as we've said, he is unpredictable. And one of the fascinating things I read about in Time magazine, where he was, again, made Time Person of the Year, which he would love on the front cover and stuff, was that when they spoke to him at Mar-a-Lago after the election, he was almost forlorn and a bit downbeat because two things. One, he loves campaigning and he loves fighting and he loves having something to fight against. And two, he knows that is his last election campaign. So what is this Trump now? This is a guy who, he's won everything, but he loves fighting against people. And that's the interesting thing here, isn't it? If he's any other politician would be like, well, this is great, I've won everything, let's go and do loads of things. Trump no longer has, everything about him has been about fighting against something. And now if he's the victor, what does he stand for and what's he going to do?
But I think there still will be battles ahead. Don't forget, they won the House, yes, but by a very slim majority, and there's lots of infighting, forgive me, within the Republican House. Mike Johnson, his speaker, isn't the most popular person. So I think there will be mini battles, for sure.
But also he knows he's got 2 years with his majority to get stuff done, and then in the midterms, unless they change the rules, it'll probably be over in terms of his majorities, because that's what tends to happen. And finally, we haven't talked about the Democrats at all, which is extraordinary in itself. What are they doing? Is every meeting of Democrats now a kind of session of self-flagellation and mea culpas? What are they doing?
There's lots of hand-wringing, there's lots of navel-gazing.
But they've basically thrown up their hands in resignation, haven't they? And,
well, I think
and a bit of subliminal anger.
Well, it brings us back to the beginning of what we just talked about. That they have, for the moment, they're still very shocked. They're nursing their wounds. There's still a lot of anger about Biden and what happened. But I think they'll regroup. I mean, I was reading yesterday, there's definitely less of a backlash. There was 100 or so that didn't come to the first Trump inauguration. The majority are. There's a list of now about 10 who aren't. I think they'll fight their battles in their states, seems to be the method, rather than big public protests against him here.
And of course, Biden, Kiran, in his, valedictory speech at the end said, we're becoming an oligarchy here. I mean, you could say, hang on a minute, it was ever thus, right? I mean, powerful people, billionaires around the presidency. There are plenty of billionaires who give money to the Democrats. But the difference, I guess, this time around is that they are more overt in the way that they are funding the president, not just the presidency. They're much more in the inner circle, much more openly so than they were before, under Obama or Biden.
Yeah, and I guess that sort of comes, I think that's, what Biden was saying about the oligarchy is obviously a very important point and a worrying point for many people. People like Elon Musk and others, and there are many more, Peter Thiel, for example, sort of manoeuvring around the White House. But, the Democrats also, back in the day, had Silicon Valley behind Obama, etc. This splits conflict between the two. And I think that's the important thing to remember is that when we talk about that vibe shift and it feel like things are behind Trump, whenever it comes to any election, there is always a reaction in the media and amongst political parties in this country and elsewhere to say, it's the end, it's the end, how do they ever come back? And they miraculously come back. So the idea that the Democrats, they are definitely feeling completely, they're angry because of Biden hanging on and there should have been a more open primary and how did we let this all happen, blah, blah, blah.
Of course they will.
But, the midterms are a moment and then in 4 years' time there is no Trump.
2 years ago, Trump was an outcast. I know we said this at the beginning.
So things do change. And I guess, so do you think that as a result of the majority he's got, the campaign he fought and what he wants to do to this country, the America that starts on Inauguration Day will be fundamentally and forever different to the America that everyone else has got used to, since World War II, effectively, both in terms of domestic and foreign policy?
I think it could indeed be. I think the key thing is that when we talk about Trump first term to this term, is that he also had a Republican House and Senate last time, and he didn't do the things as well as he could do in the first 2 years before the blue wave in 2018. Right. The key thing is, if it is going to be a fundamental sea change, and it has concrete results in terms of this country and beyond, it's Trump trying to get those promises done much more efficiently in his first 2 years.
Yeah,
let me ask you like this, Siobhan. Is this the end of the Republic as we know it?
No. I think that he will. I think that there will be. We keep coming back to the shock and awe. I think he will try and get things done quickly. We've seen the House Republicans say we're ready this time. He's got his people who are all much more subservient. I do think the one thing we can't calculate is, when you're having chats on the phone with world leaders and Elon Musk is sitting beside you and is on those calls. I think we compare it to last time. He came in. He made changes, but he found it hard. He didn't do as much as he said he was going to. The only thing we don't have any experience, there's no precedent, is when you have got the Elon Musks of this world sitting beside you and having your ear and broadcasting on Twitter. And being as influential, as influential. I think that's an unknown quantity that I think none of us can opine on because we haven't been here before. And how that will shape the presidency, that's to me the kind of million-dollar question.
Siobhan and Kiran, thank you very much to both of you. That's it from the Fourcast here in Washington, D.C. in Inauguration Week. All I've got to say to you is buckle up. It's going to get interesting.